Hi, welcome back to Music Theory Logic. My name's Andrew, and today we're going to be talking about getting your MIDI controlled piano to sound a lot more realistic. Let's go ahead into the logic session. So here is a pretty basic, predominantly chord progression that I just wrote. I have two instances of it. Got the computer sound, which is this MIDI, pretty much like default. Everything is perfect. Just wrote this in. We get this. Loop it so we can hear it a little more. Cool. Now, I don't think it necessarily sounds bad as is, but we're going to make it sound a lot better. Now, this is mainly going to pertain to a piano. However, what I'm about to talk about pertains to really anything you want to sound realistic. When us human beings play instruments, we are nowhere near as perfect as a computer. Perhaps that's obvious, perhaps it's not. What that means is if you take like the best, most proficient piano players on the planet and have them play this chord progression, if we zoom in close enough, like maybe to milliseconds, their attack is not going to be within 1,000th millisecond of the correct time. So when we're writing music in the computer, if we just write MIDI out like this, it's not going to sound the way that really any piano we've ever heard played by a human being would sound. Because again, these notes are happening literally at the same time. So one of the big things you can do is you could go in and change the different attacks. Now, in Logic, we have automated MIDI functions that will do this for us. And in many DAWs, you have the same ability. But literally what you could do is just make sure that they're slightly off from one another. We're really zoomed in, so we won't necessarily notice that being out of time. Then you could go and make the velocities even subtly different. So we're at 60, go to 63, 58, 71, 51. So now that first attack is going to feel a little bit more real. So we should switch these MIDIs because I have this bottom one labeled the computer sound. So the computer sound sounds like this on that first chord. First chord on the natural sound sounds like this. Now volume-wise, let's get them the same volume. Cool, hard to notice it there. If we were to go to do that to all of the MIDI, we would notice a lot more. So I'm going to chop it instead of literally looping the whole section twice to make it even more humanized. If you're going to humanized, I jumped ahead. We'll see why I use that term in just a second. But if you expand it to be 2 times through the chord progression or 4 times through the chord progression, let's do 4. We'll get something that's even less perceivable to be a computerized loop. So if I were to take all of these notes, drag them all, if I went to function, MIDI transform, humanize, like that, and I hit operate only, it's going to basically do what we just did, adding in imperfection. So if we zoom in, it's adding a really subtle amount of imperfection. We could even make ours less as much. Cool. So this is already going to sound a lot better than the lower one. So let's hear this natural sound. Now, certain attacks, you notice the notes that are hit harder. So if you feel like, say, this chord is too loud, we could just take that and drag our attacks down slightly to soften it. So it's that note that we're hearing louder if I turn down that velocity. All right, let's compare that. So without any imperfections, we have this. With our imperfections, we have this. Cool. And again, if you don't like how loud that note is, you could go in and adjust the velocity yourself. Cool. Let's take this and make it feel even more real. So the biggest thing you can do to make any MIDI controlled instrument sound realistic is to try to understand what the performer of said instrument does in a standard performance. So long story short, if we're thinking about a piano player, what are some of the limitations of a human being at a piano? We all have most of us have 10 fingers in total, 5 on each hand. Right? Most of us can reach at most like an octave, ninth, maybe a 13th if you're like a Franz Liszt, really big reach. Another thing you might know if you've seen a piano, it has pedals. So pedals are a way that pianists essentially smooth chord progressions out. At least one of the pedals. So the sustain pedal, the pedal most on the right, we can actually write MIDI automation in. Now in Logic, you would hit this button to bring up your MIDI controls, and then from the drop-down menu, a bunch of different options. You could go to sustain pedal. Now when this line is up, the pedal's down. You can think of it as when the line is up, the sound is activated, the sustain pedal. So we're going to bring this down between our chords. Now the last measure, we do a half note chord progression. So I could do that. And then it can be kind of weird selecting them all, but once you get selected, you can hold Option and drag them over. Should be able to. My computer is not liking that, so we could always take that and make it so it is a true loop. Again, we didn't really want that to be a true loop, so I could grab those notes and do a Humanize again. That would make it so it's not as easy to tell that this is the sequence looping. So now we have this. Cool, let's compare it. So without any MIDI adjustments, we had this. With the adjustments, we have this. Nice. So hopefully I sold you on that. Again, there's nothing wrong with writing music in the computer. I write a lot of my stuff in the box like this. I find that once you get really efficient doing that, you can get ideas from your head into the computer really quickly. But when you're doing that, you want to really mimic the way music would happen in the real world. May I remind you that before computers, we had instrumentalists playing actual instruments in recording studios that were recording to tape. And before that, we had instruments playing from written music. All the while, when people were listening to the music, they were hearing human beings perform music. So the need to put imperfection into our music is something of like the 21st century and new. But hopefully that helps you better understand how to make your pianos, your MIDI controlled pianos, feel a lot more realistic. If that helped you, you would help me out a ton by subscribing to the channel. I come out with a video like this every Tuesday that's aimed at helping you better understand music production or some things to like the lifestyle of musicianship. And then on Fridays, we drop these music theory breakdowns where we showcase a bunch of music theory based on popular songs. So hopefully you will join us for that. If so, I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.